Welcome, faculty, friends, peers, and guests. I am honored to be here today and let you know about the last 18 months of my life. We're going to get emotional. I want to share with you the work I did this summer with Lacy Consulting Services, but also my personal growth and final reflections of this unique experience. In my 9 months of coursework, we explicitly discussed emotions in one class for 2 hours. As an artist with a deep appreciation for emotional awareness, I found this troubling. Conservation at its core is helping people navigate a changing climate. Emotions are a key part of that navigation. It's one of the super skills we evolved to have, the ability to read and engage with other humans through emotions. Doesn't work, maybe. Hold, please. The computer is mad at me. Thank you so much. Yeah, okay, great. A stubborn strain of stoicism. Okay, go down. A stubborn strain of stoicism and nihilism runs through Western cultures. People believe that they can deny emotions a place in debate and use it as a cudgel against those unwilling to do self-harm against their psyches. But first, there's someone I would like to speak to more directly. Hi, me. Gosh, you're cute. I need to talk to you before I talk to them. I wish I could walk with you in all that you're going to face from what I know now. The people that won't get you, the ones who will. Before you find theater and fall in love with the power of performance, before the world began to tell you all the things you shouldn't be, you were just Greg. Your life takes twists and turns, and every unexpected spin is a gift. It brought you here with a newfound respect and connection to a part of myself I thought I lost. Your doubts were wrong, and I'm glad to have proved that our doubts are traitors and make us lose the good we oft might win by fearing to attempt. I love you, and your family loves you. It took me a long time to believe that, and I'm so lucky to be standing here today to say that. Keep going, no matter what, because honey, you are fabulous and so damn unique. Before I talk about the socio-ecological context for the summer, I want to give y'all my socio-ecological context for what brought me here. I set out my life dream to be a working actor, and I achieved it. Even had a nice little career going for me. My career and delusions of success fell apart because of the pandemic, and a few days into isolation, I got COVID for the first of many times. Upon recovery, I was brought to one of those crossroad moments where you look around and realize you're unsatisfied. I had been told I was destined for the stage. I fulfilled that destiny and was now restless. This picture is from the last show I did before the pandemic. Odd now to see it as a reminder of the isolation that we would all soon experience. From the pandemic, though, a sense of possibility bloomed. I saw an opportunity to radically change my life. As my mother puts it, that I was doing the thing millions are too afraid to do because comfort is seductive. I applied to grad school and got in, packed up my life, and trekked across this massive, beautiful country to join my future cohort. What came of those months of work and learning could take up an entire day. Simply, it showed me that with my unique point of view and critical thinking skills honed, I could be a part of the effective response to climate change. Oh, and scientists suck at communication. They could really use some charisma to face this message. My project this summer consisted of 2 separate but isolated related parts. The first was working with Lacy Consulting Services and National Arsenal Wildlife Refuge in Denver, Colorado. Lacy had been brought in with a number of other consulting groups to increase the engagement of local communities to this refuge, a place with a sad but familiar story. Arsenal had been used as a military and chemical testing site. Migratory birds and, as the world turned, the site was no longer used for testing or the military, but corporate and political interest left nerve gas and other chemicals all over, creating a Superfund site. Migratory birds and small mammals were affected with toxins, and in 1992, Congress stepped in and created the refuge. The US Fish and Wildlife Service began to clean the site, and in 2010, the cleanup program finished. Historically, the surrounding communities were kept out of this space. The US Fish and Wildlife Service wanted to repair the harm inflicted on the community. The community wanted to use it, but felt like they didn't have the right to use it, as the lingering effects of marginalization were still felt by residents. While I worked with Arsenal, I also did research on the emotional dimensions of conservation. I noticed in my work with Arsenal and in the program, emotions were a silent but present figure. I noticed in my work, and whether that be with focus group participants or just with employees, emotions and their impact were a part of every discussion we had and influenced the choices that were made on every level. With the enthusiastic approval of my partner organization, I decided to make presentations and workshops on these topics so that future practitioners would have the tools to engage with participants' emotions. Before I get ahead of myself, I want to talk about my partner organization, Lacy Consulting Services. LCS is a consultancy that works with organizations around the world to apply social science and justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion approaches to some of the largest environmental and social problems. CEO Leander Lacy is a CLTL grad himself. He was in cohort 1. He took his experiences from the nonprofit and government agency worlds to create LCS in 2019. Since beginning his work, the organization has worked with groups of all kinds on a diversity of projects. Projects like focus groups in the Bahamas to understand fishers' attitudes, working with hunters to improve deer management, connecting rural, urban, and suburban communities to ensure that values were incorporated into conservation efforts that impact livelihoods. Leander is on his 4th season of his podcast, The Green Mind Podcast, and is an incredible resource for different voices in conservation. The team at LCS is devoted to Jedi work and makes it their mission to practice what they preach, bringing inclusivity and honest, open communication to their meetings, as well as meetings with the organizations they work with. They even say they will not take a project unless the organization is willing, able, and interested in dismantling the oppressive forces that restrict marginalized communities from authentic engagement. This quote speaks to a revelation of mine that I gathered working on the first half of the summer with Arsenal. That to watch the world spin is nothing less than a miracle. Getting to listen and learn from marginalized communities reinforced the importance of that engagement. I got to lead focus groups with those communities and saw in real time the importance of emotional intelligence. While at Arsenal, I came across a living example of the work I was pursuing. I was tasked with finding members of the queer community for focus groups. I reached out to a local queer group, Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays in Denver, hoping they would have some contacts I would make. Turns out the president of PFLAG is a ranger at Arsenal. This person had no idea that Arsenal was trying to make inroads with the queer community. Quickly, they were connected with the director of the refuge, and now they're fully within the process. By siloing the information and relying on old hierarchies, the refuge left the very people out who the organization was trying to engage, proving the adage, evolve or die. With Lacy for Arsenal, we created focus groups from several marginalized communities. My co-captains from Colorado University at Boulder and I, Cheyenne Foots and Claudia Paul, that's Cheyenne Foots right here. We went to events around Denver and the refuge with the engagement coordinator at Lacy, Christiane Maldonado, with the biggest smile you've ever seen. She is literally a sunbeam of a person. This photo is from an event we did at Denver Pride. We canvassed residents for their opinions about the refuge and gave out information in multiple languages. Some residents knew about the refuge already, and some had no idea. It's not hard to sell Coloradans on an outdoor experience. While working with Lacy on Arsenal, I had a second part to my project, research. research into the emotional dimensions of conservation. And while there are many emotional dimensions to the practice of conservation, I narrowed down my search to 5. Emotions in general, values and value framing, trust ecologies, emotional labor, and the effects of marginalization on communities. And I did a lot of research. Let's do that, okay. And I really do mean so much research. We're not done yet. In total, I read something like 65 academic articles spanning the emotional dimensions. The amount of information was intense, but necessary to understand the context. With all of this information, I synthesized and found common themes that are helpful for practitioners. I learned about science, I learned that natural scientists, in their quest to be objective, have lost their humanity when speaking about the science they work on. The literature speaks to the necessity of emotions in both the discussion of and in conservation projects. These authors often speak to the difficulty of translating their work into real-world action, which is what Lacy gave me the opportunity to do, translate the work into action. My co-captains and I were finishing up our work and decided it would be best if we presented our work. Claudia, Cheyenne, and I created different projects. Claudia and Cheyenne created workshops on inclusivity and conservation through the lens of marginalized groups. I had my presentations on the emotional dimensions of conservation, and we thought they paired so well together, so we created a summer capstone symposium. This photo is from a presentation I gave on emotional labor. I did something ambitious. I gave myself a challenge. 5 presentations over 5 hours. An exhausting but thrilling adventure combining my love for the work I was doing with my unique ability to talk about it. I had friends, family, peers, colleagues from all parts of my life there, and it really was one of the highlights of my time here at CSU. And that's the summer. I ended up making an impact on a local community and underlining the social and academic importance of emotions in the conservation field. I've been told I'm too sensitive, and by so many over the years, and to see it serve a purpose for communal progress makes it all worth it. Sending out those refractions of awareness allows for those lost in the dark, to find their tribe. The organization I impact will shine those beams further. And if I have my druthers, those brilliant and blazing rays will find the tops of oppression and bigotry, disinfecting with the best solution there is, the light of love. So it comes to my recommendations for conservationists. For the practices that need to come to an end, a practice of bringing in diverse voices to placate the guilt of oppressors. This can look like only hiring Black people to work on urban issues or thinking of Indigenous people as magical. Fetishizing is not helpful. Not only is this patronizing, but it's also seen through immediately. I've heard well-meaning people turn diversity into a weapon that discredits less visible diversity, like disability, queerness, and socioeconomic position. We, as practitioners, need to accept that diversity itself is diverse. From my work this summer, I've found there are many things we can do as conservationists to create an equal, inclusive space. A space that doesn't put unnecessary emotional labor on the marginalized people that conservation is aiming to help. First is it's time to acknowledge the unrecognized potential of diversity and the many ways of knowing that exist in the world. Increasing the respect that we have for other ways of knowing is important for the progress of conservation. This will not excuse willful ignorance or fear-based approaches, but we have to acknowledge that not just Western science is the only way to learn something. As a well-meaning practitioner, I believe the best way to engage with marginalized people is to stop talking, give space, and listen. Recognizing the agency of marginalized people to tell their stories in the way they want to tell them, not the way that's easiest for me to understand. Assumption is the basis for the plantation. Assumption is the end of exploration. Curiosity is what leads to innovation and organic growth. If we're trying to learn about a community and what they need, we must enter curious and leave assumption in the dust pile of history. Comfort in learning is a contradiction, but many in conservation and other service-oriented fields believe they must be comfortable to fully absorb. No one is going to hold your hand through each step of a process, and demanding that kind of special treatment is one of the attitudes of oppression. This could be a presentation in and of itself. People are not oppressive, rather they are subject to oppressive attitudes. This gives people agency and an opportunity to reflect and change themselves, which is the longest lasting approach to change, not using shame, but accountability and a desire to change. Calling someone in to talk about these attitudes rather than calling them out and satisfying our own need to be seen as doing the right thing. No one cares that you're doing the right thing if you think it's right. The kind of egotism is just not helpful for the goal of change. So when it comes to these last things, these are my 5 conclusions from this program. And this is what I've learned, that the chance is always worth the risk. Because when I threw my hat into this ring of working in grad school, I was kind of terrified. I was like, what am I doing? I don't belong here. Why? And now I get to speak to my friends about it. I was scared at first. And now, at the end of it, I get to say, I have learned so much. I feel like I've been a sponge and get to soak up all of y'all's intelligence. And now I get to call you in 10 years and be like, hey, Rachel, can you tell me about that bat that you like so much? Oh my God, Julia, can I help you with an artist project or whatever anybody else wants to do? Because when we put ourselves up, when we're being vulnerable with each other, we create community rather than destroy it. Listen to those around you. I didn't know much about natural sciences before joining this program, but since I listened to my cohorts, my cohort mates, and my professors, and my peers, and random people in this building, I have learned so much that I'm going to take with me to my next job, to my next experience, a regular conversation you have in the middle of the street. An important one, say it or it won't happen. We can't read your thoughts, we can't read your minds. We have to know what's happening. We have to create a space where people saying what they want to say is encouraged and important and necessary. Release what no longer serves us. If we know something's not working, we should probably just leave it alone and maybe come back to it later. Which means, for example, if you believe there's going to be a massive red wave in the election and your science and your pundits are telling you one thing, maybe, just maybe they could be wrong and maybe put that as an asterisk at the end. Growth is hard, as my mom has been trying to help me with for the past several years. I didn't know how hard it was going to be to change my life. And in doing so, I feel like I have grown a lot and I'm very tired. And it's okay to not be okay. Conservation is not going to fix everything tomorrow, next week, in the 30 years, by 2030. It's not all getting fixed tomorrow. And it's okay for things to not be okay. But as long as we're taking steps to increase them and change them and add our own perspective and allow for the multiplicity of ways of knowing to be understood, organic growth happens. Which brings me to my final point. My crown is in my heart, not on my head. Not decked with diamonds and Indian stones, nor to be seen. My crown is called content, a crown that is seldom kings enjoy. If we learn to be okay with ourselves, if we learn to be okay with where we are, rather than constantly seeing some invisible future that may or may not come, we give ourselves hope, and hope is a renewable resource. Hate is not. Thank you so much for being with me today. I really appreciate it.